The city screamed. Sergeant Liam Holt pressed himself against the shattered stump of a wall, the air thick with smoke and the sharp smell of burning metal. Energy bolts, bright and deadly, zipped past, blasting chunks out of the broken buildings around him. His squad was pinned down, caught in a brutal ambush during their frantic retreat. The mission, a desperate raid on an enemy command post near their heavily guarded royal zone, had gone horribly wrong. Now, survival was the only objective. Fall back, towards the rally point. Liam yelled over the deafening roar of enemy fire and crumbling structures. His voice was raw. His soldiers, faces grimed with sweat and dust, moved in short, desperate bursts from one piece of broken cover to the next. The enemy soldiers, tall figures in sleek, dark armor that seemed to absorb the dim light, advanced with terrifying coordination. Their weapons hummed with a power that felt alien and cold. Liam risked a quick glance around the corner. Debris littered the wide avenue they needed to cross. Suddenly, a section of a towering building facade, weakened by the intense fighting, groaned ominously. Dust rained down. His eyes scanned the danger zone, searching for his squad's next path. That's when he saw her. A small figure stood frozen in the middle of the chaotic street. Right where the building was about to give way was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 5 or 6. Her simple tunic, once probably bright, was covered in gray dust. She looked tiny and utterly terrified, her eyes wide with pure fear, staring up at the cracking wall above her. She didn't run. She didn't cry out. She just stood there, paralyzed. Time seemed to slow. Liam saw the massive chunks of building materials starting to peel away, tons of rock and twisted metal plunging downwards. He saw the enemy soldiers nearby hesitate, their focus momentarily broken by the sight of the child. Their child, in the direct path of destruction. He saw his own squad members, faces etched with horror, realizing what was about to happen. Training screamed at him to keep moving, to get his squad to safety. Hatred for the enemy who had killed so many of his friends warred within him. But the sight of that small, helpless figure cut through everything. The war, the fear, the hatred. It was just a child. There was no thought, only pure instinct. No. The word tore from Liam's throat as he launched himself forward, abandoning cover completely. He ignored the enemy fire, suddenly snapping closer, ignored the shouts of his squad. His legs pumped, power armor whining as he pushed it to its limit. He covered the distance in a few heartbeats, a desperate sprint towards the falling shadow. He reached the girl just as the first massive slab broke free. There was no time for gentleness. He wrapped his arms around her small body, pulling her tight against his chest, turning his armored back towards the collapsing building. He curled over her, making his body a living shield. The world exploded. A crushing weight smashed into him like a hammer blow. His power armor shrieked in protest, joints buckling under the immense force. Pain, sharp and overwhelming, lanced through his back and legs. Dust and debris engulfed them, a choking cloud that blotted out the light and sound. He felt smaller impacts raining down, but the main weight settled, pinning him. He grunted, the air forced from his lungs, but he held his position, a human barrier between the little girl and the crushing ruin. Silence followed the terrible crash, broken only by the crackle of fires and the distant fading sounds of battle. Liam lay still, buried under rubble, his world reduced to pain, darkness, and the small, trembling form he protected beneath him. He couldn't move, wasn't sure he could even breathe properly. He just held on. Then he heard voices, sharp, urgent commands in the enemy's guttural language. He felt hands scrabbling at the debris covering him. Light pierced the dust cloud as chunks of rubble were heaved aside. Enemy soldiers, their faces hard, but their movements surprisingly careful, worked frantically to uncover them. They pulled the little girl free first. She was crying now, soft, frightened sobs, but miraculously unharmed, shielded completely by Liam's body and armor. As they lifted her clear, her bright, tear-filled eyes looked down at the soldier who had saved her. One of the enemy soldiers barked an order, pointing at Liam. Others moved towards him, their weapons lowered, but their expressions unreadable behind their helmets. Liam closed his eyes, the pain washing over him in waves. He had saved the enemy's child. Now, he was completely at their mercy. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was the little girl reaching a small hand towards him as they carried her away. Pain was the first thing Liam knew, Deep grinding ache filled his back and legs. And he tried to move, but his body felt heavy and unresponsive. He forced his eyes open, blinking against a soft, unfamiliar light. He wasn't on the battlefield. The air was cool and clean, smelling faintly of something sharp and medicinal. He lay on a firm surface, covered by a thin, smooth blanket. Strange lights glowed softly on the ceiling. Jude snaked from his arm to a quiet machine nearby. He was a prisoner, but this wasn't a prison cell. Panic flickered. Where was his squad? Where was his armor? He wore only simple gray clothes. Carefully he turned his head. The room was small and very clean. White walls, a single door, no windows. A guard stood silently by the door, tall and imposing in dark, sleek armor, a weapon held ready. The guard watched him, face hidden behind a helmet's dark visor. Memories flooded back. The crumbling city, the ambush, the terrified little girl, the falling building, the crushing impact. The child? Was she okay? He remembered her being pulled out, unharmed. The door slid open silently. Another person entered, not a soldier. This man wore a long, dark blue coat. His face was serious, his eyes intelligent and calm. He approached Liam's bed. "You are awake." "Good," the man said in clear, precise English. His voice was neutral. "Your injuries were severe. Crushed bones, internal damage. Our doctors worked hard to repair you. You will recover fully." Liam stared, confused. "Why?" His voice was rough, barely a whisper. "Why help me? I'm your enemy." The man tilted his head slightly. "You saved a life. A very important life. Child you shielded. She is the daughter of the woman who rules us. Our leader." Understanding dawned, cold and heavy. He hadn't just saved a child. He'd saved the ruler's daughter. That explained the strange care in the guard. Before Liam could speak again, the air in the room seemed to change. The guard snapped to even stricter attention. The man in the coat bowed his head. A woman stood in the doorway. She was tall and held herself with absolute authority. Her clothes were dark, simple, but made of rich-looking material. Her face was striking, sharp features set in an expression of cool control. Her eyes, a deep, intense color, fixed on Liam with unnerving focus. This, Liam knew instantly, was the ruler. The little girl's mother. She walked slowly towards the bed, her gaze never leaving Liam. He felt pinned by her stare, like she was examining a rare and puzzling object. There was no gratitude in her eyes, only a fierce, burning curiosity. She stopped beside him. "You," she said. Her voice was low and commanding, filling the small room. "You threw yourself on the falling stone for my child. You, an enemy soldier. Why?" Liam met her gaze, ignoring the pain. "She was a child," he said simply. "She was scared. Anyone would have done it." The ruler's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "No," she stated flatly. "No one else moved. Only you. They saw their enemy's child in danger, and they hesitated. You saw only the child." She leaned closer, her intense eyes searching his face. This action, it makes you unique, valuable, different." She straightened up, her decision made. "You saved the heir. The debt owed is immense. By our oldest laws, your life, your being, now belongs to the one you saved." To me, her tone left no room for argument. "You are not a prisoner of war. You are mine." The words hung in the air. Liam felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool room. He belonged to her like property. The ruler turned sharply to the man in the coat. "Contact their commander. Tell him Sergeant Liam Holt will not be exchanged. He remains here. He saved the heir. Therefore, he is claimed. He is mine to possess." Without another look at Liam, she swept out of the room, the guard following. Liam was left alone with the man in the coat, who simply gave a small, unreadable nod and followed the ruler. Liam stared at the blank ceiling, the ruler's words echoing, "You are mine." He was trapped not just by walls, but by a debt he didn't understand, and a powerful woman's dangerous fascination. Later, the door slid open again, quietly. It wasn't the ruler or the doctor. The little girl peeked around the doorframe. She saw Liam awake and slipped inside, coming closer to the bed. She didn't speak, She just looked at him with big, serious eyes, then carefully placed a small, smooth stone she'd been holding onto the blanket beside his hand. She watched him for a moment longer, then turned and silently left. Liam looked at the stone, a tiny, unexpected weight in this strange captivity. He was claimed possessed, but not entirely alone. Liam sat by the small window in his room, looking out at the strange, tall buildings of the city. He was healing, but he was still trapped. The ruler's words, "You are mine," echoed in his mind. He was not in a cell, but the door was always guarded. He was a possession, a living debt paid. He learned more about the ruler. Her name was rarely spoken, but her power was absolute. Her people called her simply the leader. Her word was law. And she had decided Liam belonged to her because he saved her daughter Maya. Maya visited often. She was a quiet child. She didn't speak Liam's language and he didn't speak hers, but she would sit near him, sometimes drawing pictures, sometimes just watching. She brought him small things, another smooth stone, a piece of shiny metal, a strange sweet fruit. Liam accepted them silently. He saw the fear had left her eyes, replaced by a quiet trust when she looked at him. It was a strange comfort in his captivity. One day, the man in the dark blue coat, who seemed to be an advisor, came to see Liam. His face was tense. "There is trouble," he said bluntly. "Our leader has spoken to your commander, Vance. She told him you will not be returned. She says you belong to her now, your commander." He was very angry. He refused. He demanded your release. Liam felt a flicker of hope, quickly smothered. What happens now? The advisor looked grim. Negotiations. It's on a station above the planet. Your ambassador and ours will talk. But our leader's claim is strong in our traditions. She will not give you up. Many of our people agree with her. They see your act as sacred, a debt that must bind you to us. But others disagree, Liam guessed, seeing the worry in the advisor's eyes. Yes, the advisor admitted. Others see only an enemy soldier. They think your presence insults our strength. They fear you are a trick. They want you gone, or dead. They argue against the leader. This causes conflict within our ranks. The ruler herself began to summon Liam more often, not to question him, but to have him nearby. He would stand silently in a corner of her large meeting room, while she spoke with her commanders and advisors. Couldn't understand the words, but he felt the tension, saw the hard looks some of the commanders gave him, saw the ruler's own intense gaze settle on him frequently, as if trying to solve a difficult puzzle. Felt like a strange animal on display. One evening, during a larger gathering in a grand hall filled with important people, Liam stood near the wall as usual. The ruler sat on a raised seat, speaking. Maya was beside her, fidgeting slightly. The air felt thick with unspoken arguments. Liam noticed a group of men near the back, their expressions dark, their eyes fixed on him with pure hatred. They didn't look like soldiers. They looked angry and dangerous. Suddenly, chaos erupted. One of the angry men shouted something, pointing accusingly at Liam. Another man lunged forward, not towards the ruler, but straight at Liam. He pulled a sharp tool from his clothing. The hall erupted in shouts. Guards moved, but they were caught off guard, focused on the ruler. Liam reacted instantly, years of training kicking in despite his injuries. He dodged the first wild swing of the tool. The attacker was fast, fueled by rage. Liam grabbed the man's wrist, trying to wrestle the weapon away. They crashed to the polished floor. Liam felt a sharp pain in his side as the tool grazed him, grunted, holding the man down with all his strength. "Stop him." The ruler's voice cut through the noise, sharp and furious. It's not afraid for herself, but commanding action. Protect the soldier. Her head guard, a tall, stern man Liam had seen often, reached them. He struck the attacker hard on the head. The man went limp. Other guards quickly grabbed the other angry men who had tried to rush forward. Maya was crying, clinging to her mother's leg. The ruler stood, her face pale, but her eyes blazing with fury as she looked at the subdued attackers. Then at Liam, struggling to his knees, a hand pressed to the cut on his side. Blood welled between his fingers. The ruler stared at Liam, then at the men who had tried to kill him. The hall was silent, except for Maya's frightened sobs. The peaceful debt had become a dangerous storm, and Liam was right in the center of it. His simple act of saving a child had saved his life again, but it had also made him a target in a war he didn't understand. The ruler's claim on him now felt like a shield that was cracking. The air on the orbital station was cold and still. Ambassador Carter Shaw sat across the wide table from the enemy advisor and their head guard. Commander Vance stood stiffly beside Shaw, his face like stone. Weeks of talking had led nowhere. The enemy repeated the same words. Liam Holt belonged to their ruler. It was a debt, was their law. "We cannot accept this," Shaw said firmly, his voice tight. "Sergeant Holt is a soldier of Earth. He is not property, must be released immediately. Keeping him is against all rules of war." The enemy advisor shook his head slowly. "The rules are not our rules. He saved the air. His life, his being, is now tied to the one he saved. To our leader, this debt, Kethril, is absolute. He is hers. There is no discussion on this point." Vance slammed his fist lightly on the table. "He saved a child. That doesn't make him a slave. It makes him unique," the head guard stated flatly. His eyes were hard. "He acted beyond war," he claimed. "If you try to take him by force, it will be seen as the deepest insult. War will return, worse than before." Shaw felt a chill. "You would restart the fighting? Over one man?" "We would defend our leader's right," the head guard replied. "Her claim is sacred." Back on the planet, Liam felt the tension growing. His room felt smaller. The guards outside seemed more alert. Maya visited less. The ruler kept her close. When the ruler summoned Liam now, it was to stand beside her seat in the large meeting hall, not just in the corner. Her commanders glared at him. They understood the danger he was in, both from the enemy hardliners and from the possibility his own people might try something desperate to get him back. One morning, instead of the usual summons, the ruler herself entered Liam's room. She wore her usual dark, commanding clothes. Maya stood beside her, holding her mother's hand tightly, her small face serious. The ruler looked directly at Liam. "Come," she ordered. "You will stand with me. Your commanders are coming here." Liam's heart pounded. Here, to the heart of enemy power. This was unexpected and dangerous. He followed silently as the ruler led the way through guarded corridors to the largest hall he had seen, the throne room. It was vast, with high ceilings. Important enemy officials stood in rows, their faces tense. The head guard stood near the ruler's raised seat, his hand resting on his weapon. The ruler took her seat. Maya stood beside her. She gestured for Liam to stand on her other side. He did, feeling exposed, the focus of hundreds of hostile eyes. The air hummed with silent anger and fear. Large doors at the far end of the hall slid open. Ambassador Shaw and Commander Vance entered, flanked by only 2 human guards. They walked down the long aisle, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Shaw looked pale but determined. Vance scanned the room, his eyes locking briefly with Liam's, filled with fierce protectiveness. They stopped before the ruler's seat. Leader Shaw began formally, but the ruler raised her hand, silencing him. "You speak of rules," she said, her voice clear and cold, filling the huge space. "I speak of debt, of life. That man," she pointed at Liam without looking at him, "saved my child. He shielded her with his own body. He gave his strength for her life. By our oldest law, his life, his strength is now bound to hers. To me, he is mine." She leaned forward slightly, her intense gaze fixed on Shaw and Vance. "The war drains both our peoples. It kills our children. I offer you this, an end, a truce. The fighting stops. Today." A murmur rippled through the room. Shaw's eyes widened slightly. "A truce? On what terms?" "Terms you will find fair," the ruler stated. "Borders will be set. Prisoners exchanged, all but one." Her finger pointed again at Liam. He remains with me, is the living guarantee. His presence here, claimed by me, is the price of peace. He is the shield that stops the war." She paused, letting the terrible weight of her words sink in. "If you take him, if he leaves this place, the truce ends. Immediately, the war returns, and it will be total. No mercy, no prisoners. His departure means war. His presence here means peace. He is mine. He is peace. Choose." Silence crashed down. Shaw looked stunned, horrified. Vance's face twisted with fury, his hands clenched into fists. He looked at Liam trapped beside the enemy ruler. The entire room held its breath. The fate of billions rested on this impossible choice. Leave Liam as a possession and gain peace, or demand his freedom and condemn countless more to die. Liam stood frozen beside the ruler, feeling the weight of her claim and the desperate hope for peace crushing down on him. He looked at Maya, her eyes wide and scared, then back at his commanders. The price of peace was himself. The silence in the huge hall was crushing. Liam felt the weight of every stare. The enemy leaders, the hard-faced guards, his own commanders, Ambassador Shaw and Commander Vance. Shaw looked pale, trapped in an impossible decision. Vance's fists were clenched, his jaw tight with anger and helplessness. The ruler sat perfectly still beside Liam, her face like cold stone, waiting. Her demand hung in the air. Leave Liam as her possession, and the war ends. Take him, and the fighting starts again, worse than before. Peace or Liam, billions of lives or his freedom. Liam looked down at Maya. She stared back at him, her eyes wide and scared, clinging to her mother's leg. He saw the little girl he'd shielded from the falling building. He thought of the soldiers on both sides, tired and afraid. He thought of cities burning, families broken. The ruler saw him only as a thing, a prize, a debt paid. But he was a man. He had made a choice that day. He took a deep breath, ignoring the pain still in his back. He stepped forward, away from the ruler's seat towards Shaw and Vance. The movement broke the frozen silence. Every eye followed him. The ruler's intense gaze snapped to him, sharp and questioning. He stopped before his commanders and the watching enemy. He turned to face the ruler, standing straight despite the ache. Leader Liam said, his voice clear in the vast quiet, "You speak of debt? Cathrol? You say I saved your daughter's life? That my life is now bound to hers? To you?" The ruler watched him unblinking. "It is the law," she stated. Liam nodded slowly. "I understand the debt. But a shield," he continued, his voice growing stronger, "is not a possession. It is a choice. That day, I chose to protect a life. Any life. I chose to be a shield." He looked directly at the ruler, meeting her fierce eyes. "Holding me here, calling me yours. That doesn't claim the choice I made. It traps it. It chains it." He paused, letting the words sink in. True strength isn't in owning the protector leader. It's in becoming one. Let me stay. Not as your property, not as a debt paid. Let me stay by choice. A ripple of surprise went through the enemy leaders. Shaw and Vance stared at Liam, hope flickering in their eyes. Liam kept his gaze locked on the ruler. "Let me stay as the first guardian, a bridge between our peoples. My role, to help build understanding, to make sure this truce holds, is to protect Maya, as I did before." He gestured towards the child. "To advise you freely, showing you what Terran strength truly means, not just weapons, but the choice to protect, even when it's hard." He finished. The hall utterly silent again. The idea hung in the air. Not possession, but guardianship. Not forced servitude, but a chosen duty. Maya tugged gently on her mother's hand, looking up at her with pleading eyes. The ruler sat very still. Her sharp face showed no emotion, but her eyes, fixed on Liam, seemed to burn. She looked at him, then at her daughter, then back at Liam. The rigid belief that he was simply hers seemed to waver against the power of his offer. To serve by choice, to protect willingly. It offered the strength she sensed in him, without the shame of ownership. It offered a path forward. The silence stretched. Liam held his breath. Shaw and Vance stood rigid. The enemy leaders watched their ruler. Finally, the ruler inclined her head. It was a small movement, but in the absolute stillness, it felt huge. Her voice, when she spoke, was lower, less certain than before, but still clear. "You remain, Guardian Holt." She paused, the words unfamiliar on her tongue. "By your choice. Advise. Protect. Show us this." Terran strength. Relief washed through Liam, sharp and sudden. Shaw let out a quiet breath. Vance gave a single, tight nod. The ruler stood, signaling the agreement was made. The truce begins now. Liam didn't return to stand beside the ruler's seat as property. He stood beside it as Guardian Holt. The war was paused. An uneasy peace settled over the hall. Liam looked out at the faces, enemy and human, filled with suspicion and fragile hope. His body still ached from the falling stone, but the weight of the future felt different. He wasn't owned, he had chosen. He was a shield, not chained, but standing firm, the cornerstone of a new and fragile peace. The real work was just beginning.